Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We're talking about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm here today with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore, is back with us. How's it going, Bill?
It's going fine, thank you.
All right, so we've got a few things to cover today. We're going to talk about Tesla Model 3Y battery degradations. And we're going to talk about what China has for an electric vehicle advantage. We're going to talk about our Chinese EV manufacturers and battery manufacturers using slave labor.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the Tesla robotaxi unveil date being released. And then we got a special treat. We're going to talk about some comparisons between 1910 electric vehicles and current day electric vehicles. That sounds like it's going to be a very interesting
Yeah,
topic.
it's an interesting topic, yes.
All right. So for starters, we're going to talk about this topic. One of the things I see people all the time, and I don't know why, people think that EV batteries only last for like 5 years or 50,000 miles. And by law, they have to be warranted for a minimum of 100,000 for full
Yeah.
replacement.
8 years or 10,000 or
Yeah,
10
8 years
years.
or 100,000 miles.
Yeah.
And as an example, Rivian warranties their batteries for 175,000 miles to get a
Good on
replacement
them.
battery. And some of the Tesla model, the Model X and the Model S, have a 150,000 mile warranty. And your basic rear wheel drive threes and Ys have 100,000. And then their long range has 120,000. They all still stick with the 8 years, but they
Right.
have just longer warranties on the mileage. And people have these thoughts. Now, I've known people who've had their batteries go out in the warranty period. Okay. But what you don't generally see is if that battery lasts that long, it's not going to just fail. Now, the definition of failure in a battery is if it's fallen below 70% of the original range.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when that happens, the systems on the vehicle just don't work right. So it's not just a matter of whether you still have juice, it's a matter of whether the vehicle engine will function properly. Now, so I'm going to share this. This is what we've got here. So this study was done, and this is data being released from Tesla because they have all this data coming in because all of their vehicles are just basically big data centers on wheels. And this is, on average, the degradation after 200,000 miles on the batteries on the Model 3 and the Model Y long range is 15%. Now, I remember Musk saying previously the expected battery life of a long-range battery is approximately 450,000 miles. It's considered to be the service life of that battery. On a standard range, it's considered to be 300,000 miles. But so what they're saying here is if you had a 300-mile battery that was a long range, after 200,000 miles of driving, you would have dropped about 45 miles off that. Should be it.
Yeah.
Still 255. Now, let's see. The average retention is 85%. They previously did this on the Model S and the Model X, which averaged a 12% loss. So a smaller loss after 200,000 miles. Bill, excuse me.
Stay with us there, man.
I'm dying over here.
Yeah.
So, according to its estimate, on average, a vehicle in the United States gets scrapped after 200,000 miles of usage and 150,000 miles in Europe, which means the batteries last long enough to never need replacing. That's one of the things that people ask us. It's like, well, how can it be affordable to own an EV when you have to pay to replace the battery?
You will.
And yeah, and it's very unlikely. You could, it's a chance. It's just like your motor could go out in your car after 100,000 miles. It's unlikely, but anyways, I gotta stop smoking apparently. Jeez. I don't, for those of you
I've
who are
never
listening.
seen him smoking, folks, so I think that's
Yeah.
probably not the case. So.
Well, I might spontaneously combust like an EV battery. You
Yeah,
never know.
right. Yeah.
Let's see. What else we've got here? On the Model 3 and Model Y, past the last 15%, an average of losing 1% every 13,333 miles. But we know that's not really the case, because here we're having a chart, because it goes down pretty rapidly in the first little bit. So to here, to where it gets down to a little above, say about 93, 94%. And then it slowly continues
Yeah.
after that. I've been looking at the retention done by Recurrent on some of the used EVs for sale that actually are posting the Recurrent page. And a lot of these cars have, say, 60 to 80,000 miles, and they still have 94 to 95% of the original battery, strength.
Yeah.
So that's really not a big drop when you think about it. And, most gas cars lose gas mileage after a certain amount of driving as well. So things get built up in them.
One of the questions I should ask ChatGPT.
There you go. There you go. So theoretically, for every full charge you do, now when it says full charge, this means adding 250 miles, not by adding like 20 to 40 miles a day. It would lose about 1% for every 53 full charging cycles, which, that sounds like a lot to me. But when you start going the math the other way, it's the same number. It's every 13,000 miles. The average is just one measurement. The chart shows us other things. The capacity fade has the highest rate initially, and then it slows down, remains quite linear. It seems that the first 10% might be lost between 60 and 80,000 miles. Although when I'm looking at our friend's site, and maybe he doesn't sell any, that the battery rating isn't at least 91%, because I haven't seen one. He hasn't had any for sale that have a battery rating of less than 91, and most of them are around 94 or 95.
Yeah.
He's had them with 99, but that's really rare to see as well. And there are people who claim they've only ever lost like 1% on their battery range. And I suspect a lot of that has to do with the fact that maybe they're never charging above 80%.
Yeah.
They probably never run their battery all the way down, so they stay within a certain range.
Yeah, that'd be my guess.
I'll admit, I overcharge my cell phones. I mean, I leave them sitting on
I do all the time.
I leave them sitting on a wireless charger all the time, and I just let them sit there. It makes me wonder. It's like, well, how much am I harming the battery on those phones?
Yeah.
I don't know. They're always at 100%. Let me see. Here was the numbers for the Model S and the Model X. They were losing 1% about every 16,667 miles. So that's a lot.
Where's the data coming from for this?
This is coming from Tesla. This is coming from Tesla. This is coming from cars that are on the road.
Okay.
Yeah. So this isn't just like picking a random 100 cars. This is picking all the cars out there, collecting data, what's actually happening in the real world.
Right.
So,
and that's got to be a huge data set. So,
oh yeah, I'm sure it is. I mean, they've sold millions of cars.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a highly accurate number. Let's see. Now, this is coming. The next article is coming from our friends at the World Economic Forum. We're part of the propaganda arm of the WEF, is what I've been told. Yeah, I'm still waiting on my check. Anyways, I can't think of the guy's name that's from Eastern Europe that they always gets criticized. Anyways, maybe he'll send me a check. I just can't think of the billionaire's name. Oh well. Anyways, China has an electric vehicle advantage, but can it maintain its edge? Now, there's a lot of things that the Chinese have advantages in. For one, they have access to the raw materials. They have access to cheaper labor. They have big industry scale. And part of it is,
They've cornered the processing of those things, like lithium and turning those materials that make super magnets. They've cornered the processing of that. So it's just not the raw materials; it's also the supply stream that they've got a grasp on. So,
one thing. This isn't Chinese, but let's take Tesla. Musk calls his company a technology company that happens to build cars, right?
right.
Well, I think most of these Chinese EV manufacturers, they didn't come from the gas car space.
No,
they all started from scratch, and they're kind of like Tesla in that they've treated it like they were making a phone and putting wheels on it. And so what's happened is they've taken a completely different direction. Whereas when you take the big three automakers and you take all the Japanese automakers, they're basically retooling factories and they're trying to change a gas car over to an EV. Whereas with Tesla, even with the semi trucks, everything, they've started from the ground up. They started with an EV to give it the capabilities of other types of cars.
Well, yeah, like BYD, they were a cell phone battery maker, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's a big change. But you look, a couple of the Chinese automakers have come from the cell phone space.
Yeah.
And they started making cars. And it's a completely different manufacturing process that they've been able to adopt here. But let's see. The global auto industry's potential for Chinese automakers should not be overlooked. Well, they're the largest exporter of cars in the world, cars, period. Now, part of that is because they sell so many gas-powered cars into Russia. So Russia is a really big market for them, and there's some other big markets for them. But let's see. Chinese automakers have struggled to find success in mature markets, including the Western Europe and the US. Of course, we don't have Chinese autos selling in the US. EVs represent a potential ticket to gaining a more influential seat.
Technically, we do.
Right. We've got some that have kind of snuck in. I mean, we see the Volvo.
Polestar and Volvo, yeah.
Yeah. So EVs sell in China for the equivalent of $34,000, lower than the $55,000 average in the United States. And we see them keep getting cheaper, right? That's all we see is we see the price on the EVs going down.
Yeah. In some cases, that's really good if you're the buyer and not so good if you're on the investment side. I mean, I noticed
I don't know.
A couple of my stocks went the last couple of days. It like crashed. So,
well, part of it is I don't know that the average investor understands that the cost of manufacturing the vehicles should be going down. That's not saying it's doing that for everybody. Lucid's still not there because they've got to get to an economy of scale. But it really just depends on the company.
Yeah, have you seen the president's comments about how that they're years ahead of Tesla?
Oh no, I did not.
Oh yeah. He's come out. I forget his name now, but basically the last few days he's been touting that their technology for their drive system is so much more efficient. They're getting 5 miles per kilowatt, which is dramatically I don't know what is it. It's not quite 50% improvement over Tesla, but it's a pretty dramatic improvement. So.
Yeah, Tesla's, most of them get about 3.5.
Yeah.
3.5 miles per kilowatt.
No, I can't. That's just his comments. I haven't verified it, but that's his big selling point right now. And of course, he has one less competitor now in the world. Of course, you've heard about Fisker declaring bankruptcy this week. Yeah.
Well, Tata's EVs that they make in India get 8 miles per kilowatt hour.
Well, yeah, but you have to pedal it most of the time, don't you?
Yeah, I'm just saying a lot of that, the miles per kilowatt hour, is based on the weight of the vehicle.
Oh yeah,
And
and
so
that
you're
doesn't weigh
adding
a
a lot.
thing. Yeah,
And the Teslas the Model Y is considered to be the safest vehicle on the planet. And I'm sure it has to have some weight to be able to
yeah.
do that.
Well,
And
in the
so,
way they've engineered the structure and stuff like that. So yeah,
yeah, I'm just saying, that there's a difference there between weight versus safety, I guess.
right.
You know, um, Let me see. Our EV studies suggest a key factor fueling Chinese EV demand is the confidence consumers have when it comes to how quickly and aggressively these changes
Yeah,
are being addressed in China. Well, I mean, most of the Chinese EVs are actually sold in China.
yeah. That's their
Respondents are
biggest
far less.
market. Yeah,
43% of EV intenders say there are not enough places to plug a car in. That number is lower by nearly 1/3 in China. One of the things I was reading in China is most of your light poles now have, if there's a street lamp, it also has an EV charger attached to it.
yeah, yeah. Hey,
So
I
that's
I proposed that idea over a decade ago. I've got two light poles out here. They have a little cover, and I thought all we got to do is just tap into that. But then somebody said, "Yeah, but they turn the power off at dawn." Okay, I'm sure that can be fixed.
there's always something, right? Well,
There's
maybe you
always
just
something
charge it
there.
at
Yeah,
night, right?
yeah. Well, yeah. When the street lights are on, charge it at night. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's when air conditioning's not being used.
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean it would make sense then to only have it charging that time. Let's see. All right, so we're going to cover another topic here. This was something that I was doing a little checking on. I found a few articles on this topic. I don't know about this quartz company for their news or whatever, but the title is Chinese EV batteries for Tesla and others use slave labor, lawmakers say. Battery manufacturers Cattle and Goshen, I know I could say CATL, but I always call it Cattle, are linked
Right.
to several automakers, including Ford and Volkswagen. Well, Republican lawmakers are calling for the U.S. to ban products from Cattle and Goshen, citing indisputable evidence that their supply chains use slave labor. One of the issues here is that Cattle, who is making batteries for Mercedes, Tesla, BMW,
Hmm.
and Ford is teaming up to build a plant in Michigan
Yep.
with
Yep.
them. Yeah, that they're connected to forced labor for Uyghur ethnic minority that has been being persecuted in China for the last few years, not first few years,
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
few years. Anyways, it's a company called Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps is a sanctioned paramilitary group sanctioned by the U.S. and its partner companies. It sources materials from a subsidiary of the government-owned Xinjiang Non-Ferrous, which has been accused of participating in human rights violations. And this is okay.
Yeah.
So
They have.
Volkswagen tried to do a investigation. They found no evidence of human rights violations, but I just, I we talked about this before. China is not a great actor on the world stage. Okay, there's so many things they do. People, you feel free to leave your opinions in the comments,
Yeah.
but it's just, they have unfair
Yeah.
trade practices. But yeah, the forced labor stuff like that is an issue. So many companies in the auto space try to certify that their products are not using this type of labor, or slave labor, child labor, but it's very difficult when you're going through all these different levels of contractors and subcontractors. It's not always simple to
No.
figure out where everything is coming from. And
Well,
so
that's why which one is it? Volvo, I think, is planning to use blockchain technology to verify the product supply chain for its batteries, and that apparently by 2035 or something like that, all battery manufacturers or manufactured in Europe have to have that certification trail that is backed up by a global uh, what's the word I'm looking for here? Not registry, but basically on the blockchain. And that's what I think, it's going to happen with those things coming out of China. They're going to have to, have a way to verify that, child labor or Uyghur slave labor, if that's what we want to call it, isn't being used to produce these products. Got to keep
Yeah, and
these people honest.
this hasn't just been in the EV space. So in February, Volkswagen confirmed that thousands of Porsche, Audi, and Bentley cars have been held at U.S. ports because components within them violated U.S. laws prohibiting forced labor. So this is a much bigger issue than just cattle, but it is, disheartening to see this. But I'm sure something will, this is going to go further than where it's at. It's just a matter of how in depth and everything comes out of this. Let's real quick. Let's talk about. There was an announcement today that Musk says he's giving a robotaxi unveil date of August 8th. It says 8/8.
Yeah, he did that a few weeks ago, actually.
Yeah. The vehicle is going to result in a cost per mile cheaper than a subsidized bus ticket.
If you're brave enough to get in it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's supposed to be safer than a human driver, but
the thing is, they're going to be operating. Well, I don't know. I take that back, because they could be. We used Uber when we were out in Seattle to get us from my daughter's house to downtown Seattle and back, and those Uber drivers, they go everywhere. So I'm just wondering. Well, he's got millions of cars out there collecting all that data, so I'm assuming he'll, by the time he rolls this thing out, hopefully, it'll have streets down and lights and stop signs and all those things. And what was the one that was the traffic cones on the GM program in San Francisco? Mm-hmm. People would put traffic cones on them and they wouldn't move. And so, yeah, I mean, I can see the advantage of this because if you don't want to own a car, you don't have to own a car. There may be times when, you need one to, go to a doctor's office or, to do your shopping or go visit friends that are outside the range of, the mass transit or your electric bicycle, where it would come in handy. But
well, his claim,
in my mind, it's going to take me a while. I'm an old hat here, and it's going to take me a while to trust climbing into one of those things.
Well, saying that it's going to be cheaper than a subsidized bus ticket, when I start looking at the math, it is not as great of a deal as that sounds. Okay, so Musk believes the vehicle is going to result in a cost per mile cheaper than a subsidized bus ticket. Well, the cost of a bus differs depending on the metro area. That cost per mile can range from $7.40 in Charlotte to $30 in New York City to operate a bus per mile. Now, I realize buses don't go very fast, but still, it just seems hard to fathom how that could be. Teslarati reports that Robotaxi could have two designs: a $25,000 car that'd be cheaper than current models, which consumers can drive, and a second model that comes with a steering wheel and is built to be fully autonomous. Oh, without a steering wheel.
Without a steering wheel, fully autonomous.
Oh, God.
Shades of what Google and Alphabet did. God, how long's that been ago now? A good decade, when they introduced that little bubble car with no steering wheel and autonomous driving. Yeah,
it's scary. Autonomous cars could have several benefits. They could lead to fewer injuries and deaths. Car crashes are the leading cause of death in the U.S. for those between ages 1 and 54. All right, I'm above 54 now. We're both
You're
safe, Bill.
Man. We're safe, man.
We're safe. Now we have to worry about heart
I'm just
disease.
Barely above 54, though.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. We're not exponentially barely.
Right. right?
Let's
Compared to
see.
Methuselah, right?
Right, there you go. You're just a
Okay,
fraction of his age.
right.
Yes. Um, they can reduce congestion, which would shorten commute times. Well, not if you don't, if you have, 100,000 of them running around one city.
Well, yeah, this is an issue, and we should probably talk about that.
People are going to call them the new metallic roaches
Yeah,
running around town.
yeah,
Okay. Um, let's see. Less congestion could reduce environmental problems. Idle cars increase global temps, which cause more extreme weather events. Doesn't have to stop at cars. This company found success with self-driving tractors. That's kind of interesting. There's reports of self-driving cars being unsafe. Tesla had to recall models last year. The company even received a safety award for the Tesla Model Y. We'll see. The unveiling of Robotaxi could provide us with more details on a timeline for this new technology and added safety measures. That's one thing. I think they're constantly looking from um, how they can improve safety in the cars. That's something that Tesla has always taken a pretty serious approach to, it seems.
yeah.
Um, no more crashes from speeding, drunk driving, sleepy drivers, or jumping signals. Well, it's a different take on driving, that's for sure. It's going to
Yeah,
be hard to deal with.
I wonder though about this assumption that having all these cars running around will reduce congestion. Because when you think about it, a typical 8 to 5, kind of a work schedule thing, all those cars are on the road from 8, till 9 or 7:30 or whatever it is, it takes you to get to work. There's that congestion, but then they all park, right?
Right.
And then there's the big rush out where the big whale glob, tsunami of cars head for home. But if you've got these cars now that are shuttling and running around and picking people up and things, does that really reduce congestion? I don't know. I guess we
I
have
don't
to
know.
see.
I'm not so sure about that. That was a question I had in my own mind,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
switching to an autonomous vehicle, how it was improving congestion, because in theory then you have one less person on the road,
right,
right? The person who would be
right.
driving. But does that necessarily make it less congested? I mean, it
Yeah.
might mean there's less people in the car.
I mean, this argument was raised. Oh God, back years and years ago about will it reduce congestion or just clutter the roads up more with more cars without drivers, running around. So I don't know. I think time will have to tell on that one. I'll see what unfolds.
All right, Bill, now it's time for you to tell us about some of the changes that have been going on since 1910 in the EV space.
Well, I got into a long and engaging conversation. Started with my original chat box that I Pi AI, and then I came across another one called Deep AI, and where the Pi AI is a conversational one, so you can carry on. You type in your questions, and then it comes back with if you want it, comes back with a voice response as well as a text response, and that's kind of fun to do. And you change voices from from a guy to a girl and so on. But it's a little bit slower, and so I found this one, this deepai.org. So I started carrying on a conversation with it, and one of the things that we have, issues that we have, is people are continually saying, well, EVs are too expensive. And there's there's a story where the people are putting off now, or people are not going back to, what was it, 46% are not going back to electric cars after they've driven one. And
No, that's not
that
what it
whole,
said. It said that
yeah,
something
yeah.
like they were going to buy an additional car.
Yeah, but then also the point being made is that they're going to delay their purchase of an electric vehicle, because the question is generally asked, are you looking to buy your next car to be electric? And people are saying, well, I think I'll keep the one I have, and actually that's a trend. The age of our cars is really increasing substantially. But we'll still consider it, but not this next go around. We're still more comfortable, and we think the technology needs to improve some more. And of course, that's happening. So I started that kind of a conversation. Said, now, so in 1908, a revolution took place in 1908 when Henry Ford introduced the Model T, and he completely rearranged how cars were put together, and all that sort of technology that suddenly sprang. Because up to this point, these cars were basically each car was being built by hand. I started looking at some of the old ads for all of the different electric car companies that were out there. There were all kinds. We think of Detroit Electric, and we think of maybe Waverly, and a bunch of them out there. One I found was the Hupp Yates. Never heard of it, but the Hupp Yates is kind of the Lucid of its day. Top of the line, expensive, equivalent in in our dollars, but equivalent in 1908, 1910 time frame of a car well over $112,000, right? So Henry Ford revolutionized that with the introduction of the Model T, which was selling for, depending on your options, and there weren't a lot of options, $850. Okay. Now, the average workman at that point, the average wage of a workman was $750 a year. So when you look at that, then the cost of a Model T was only about 1.3 or 1.5, something like that, multiple of what the person made in a year, as opposed to these handmade cars, these luxury EVs, which Henry Ford's wife drove, by the way. That the wage differential there was multiples. In fact, the Hupp Yates electric car had a multiple of 166.5 times the value times what an average worker made in 1908, 1910 time frame. So that really got me to looking at that, started thinking, wow. So when we start talking about, well, all these headlines, when are we going to get a $25,000 electric car? What we're saying is when are we going to get a Model T? Because the Model T in 1908 was comparable in ratio price to what a $25,000 EV would cost today. Then this led down to this whole rabbit hole of okay, the other issue is electricity. And I really found this interesting because people say, well, we don't have any place to charge it. And we know for about 40% of the population, that's true. If you live in a big apartment complex, you've got no place to charge it unless you have a long extension cord and you hang it out your window and you run it out to your parking spot, or you're lucky enough to have a garage, and that garage has a 110 plug in it, which of course, as we know, takes all night to put 30 or 40 miles of range back in the car.
Right.
So then I started looking at that, and I said, well, how many people in 1910 had electricity? And so in 1910, 36.9% of American homes had electricity. Okay. Well, how was that electricity distributed? In other words, does everybody have access to it? No. Most of that electricity, the homes in urban areas, 64% of those homes had electricity. Suburbs were only then starting to develop because we had the availability of private automobiles. 44.8% of those homes, because most of those were going to be new homes, right?
Yep.
And so they had electricity to put in the new homes. Rural communities had 24.3%. And it wasn't until the 1950s that we got rural electrification that we started to see more and more of those coming up. So then I asked it, well, where, how was that distributed nationally, regionally? So here's the interesting thing that I found. Okay, states with the highest electrification rates, in other words, over 50% of the population, were Massachusetts, New York, Illinois, Michigan, and California. And the states with the lowest amount of electricity, availability were Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana. And I thought, well, that's interesting. That kind of mirrors what's happening with the penetration of electric cars. And so the Deep AI responded, that is a great observation. Yes, the patterns of electrification, and I'm quoting here, the patterns of electrification in the early 20th century do share some similarities with the adoption of electric vehicles, EVs, in the 21st century. In both cases, we see an urban-rural divide. Just like the early 20th century, we see regional differences similar to the regional disparities of electrification rates in the early 20th century. We see early adopters. We see infrastructure challenges. We see government policies. Okay. All of these kind of mirroring what has happening over a century ago when we were starting to put electricity into homes and businesses and farms. There are some differences. It points out she. How come I'm calling it she? There are also significant differences between the two periods. Scalability, a widespread adoption of electricity in the early 20th century was a gradual process that took decades. EV adoption is happening much faster due to advances in technology and economies of scale. Cost, while electricity was once a luxury good only accessible to the wealthy, EVs are becoming increasingly affordable as battery costs decrease. Ever heard that message before? Network effects. The widespread adoption of electricity created a snowball effect, making it easier for individuals and businesses to adopt. Similarly, as more people adopt EVs, it becomes easier for others to do as well, which I thought was really, really interesting to get the response. But to see that similarity, the places where most of the EVs are is where electrification was first early adopted, which is fascinating to me.
Well, it makes sense that it's always going to happen first in the big cities, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And EVs have a certain, appeal to people as commuter cars, so it makes more sense that they're. And the other thing is too, where gas price is the highest, where
Speaking of gas prices, one of the sales pitches of one of the electric car manufacturers, I think it was Detroit Electric, one of the sales pitches in there, because they didn't, radio wasn't widespread. In fact, I don't think it was even available in 1910. So they used newspapers. So one of the ads in the newspapers has a thermometer, two thermometers next to each other. One says the price of gasoline, the other says the price of electricity. And the price of gasoline, it says, is going up, but the price of electricity is coming down. So I looked at the thermometer, and they had the thermometer registering it at 24. That was their scale. I don't know what that, maybe that was Celsius or something. At 20, well, the price of gasoline showed in the illustration was where the thermometer said 23. So I did a little math on that, and it turns out that in 1908 dollars, right, or actually in 2024 dollars, that 24, I think it must be cents, 24 cents, right. Yeah, that's what it is, 24 cents or 23 cents of gasoline per gallon, which, wow, really sounds cheap, is equivalent today to $6.58 a gallon.
California prices.
California prices in 1908 or mid-1910s. So that was fascinating. Also, that Ford Revolution in 1908, that car went on sale for essentially $850, which was slightly more than what the average annual wage was of a worker in the United States. Remember, I said it was $753.
But not at Ford. That wasn't the wage at Ford, though.
Oh, no, because Ford did his little deal. I'm going to pay him more because I had created a market for my cars. So that was brilliant. But what happened is over time, by 1920, now the Ford Model T is becoming pretty, long in the limb, so to speak, in terms of technology. But by 1920, you could then pick up a Ford Model T, a new one, for $200, and I think it was $70 or some number,
Oh, wow.
$260. So they had dropped that premium from 1.35 or whatever it was, the base wage or the annual income of a worker, to where it was now less than, I think it was like 20% of what the average worker made. That was what continuing improvements in efficiency and efficiency could do. So if we saw something similar to that, we could see the price of electric cars really dramatically coming down if we have that same sort of technological improvement along the way. And the Chinese, of course, are already showing us
They're already
some
there.
of that. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's an interesting analogy.
$10,000 cars. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard for people to fathom that really exists. And it's not like they're just some cheap car. They're actually a decent car.
This is no, I've not seen any. I saw very early Chinese import cars into Mexico City. This was 15 years ago. So I've seen those, and those were, they wouldn't pass muster unless you're really desperate.
Right.
But now they've got, because all these Chinese car companies, these guys are very smart. They're not dumb, and so they found technology that they could buy and bring in, or partnerships. BYD, one of its early partnerships was with Mercedes-Benz, right? You got Volkswagen was in there decades. One of the most popular cars ever sold in China were Volkswagen cars, manufactured in China, but they were Volkswagens.
Right.
So they learned from those people and ended up buying plants and things and bringing that technology and hiring experts and then incorporating that into their vehicles. So they set out a plan that they were going to dominate this market, as well as solar panels and batteries and other stuff. And they're executing that plan. They're executing it well.
That's good. That's good. That was a good story. All right. Well, Bill, that's all we've got for today.
Okay.
Folks, I want to thank everyone for watching.
Yeah. Talk to you next week.
Yep. And please, if you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe, share it with others. And otherwise, we'll be back next week. Have a great day.